tonight we're delighted to welcome back Abbe Wright. She's the Assistant Director of Creative Development for Penguin Random House's content marketing team. And each time Abbe visits us, we all come away with reading lists a mile along. So I know tonight Abbe will enthrall and entice us with many new titles, perfect for our summer reading. So we are recording tonight's program. So if you forget any of those titles, you can easily go back and watch it again on our YouTube channel and let your friends and family know who couldn't be with us. Our YouTube channel is, it takes about a week sometimes for us to get it on the YouTube channel, but it will be there. And I also want you to know that prior to her work at Penguin Random House, Abbe was a contributing editor at Glamour and assistant editor at O, the Oprah magazine. She has also written for The Cut, Metro, Modern Bride, Elegant Bride, and Philadelphia magazine. She earned her BA in English from Denison University in Granville, Ohio. And Abbe was raised outside of Philadelphia and recently moved back there from Brooklyn, New York. So before Abbe begins, I just want to remind everyone to stay muted throughout the program, but we're going to have questions at the end. So you're welcome to unmute yourself then and ask your question personally, or you can chat it, type it into the chat function, and we'll be glad to read that off for Abbe. We'd also like to thank Jen Wastrom, Abbe's aunt, who introduced Abbe to the Mark Twain Library and has helped make this evening possible. So Abbe, welcome back. We appreciate you coming to the Mark Twain Library once again.
Thank you so much. I'm glad to be back. I'm even more glad to be kicking off the summer season, which for me is my favorite time to read. Followed closely by spring, fall, and winter, but there's something about summer reading that just feels right, I think. So to that end, I wanted to do a little icebreaker. This way I'm not talking at you the whole time. So I wanted to ask all of you to reflect on that summer read that has stuck with you for all time. It can be something you read last summer. It can be something you read over Memorial Day weekend, or it can be something that you read as a kid. So for me, the book that sticks most in my memory of summer reading is The Divine Secrets of the Yaya Sisterhood by Rebecca Wells. And I remember reading this book at summer camp in my bunk. I remember exactly the way Rebecca describes her Louisiana upbringing and how sticky hot it was and the sound of the bugs in the trees. I just absolutely love that book, and I've read it so many more times since then, but it always makes me feel like I'm back at camp. So for me, that is my quintessential all-time favorite summer read. So is there anyone who wants to go next? A summer read that they just absolutely love?
I know mine was Anna Green Gables, the series, and that was back maybe when I was in middle school. And I just remember spending a whole summer reading this series and loving every minute.
Oh, that's such a good one, Elaine.
Anybody else want to share? You're welcome to unmute yourselves and let us know your favorite.
I'm having a hard time picking. I mean, when I think of summer, the way you just described it, Ab, it's all about Nancy Drew, and that is dating me. But I just remember going to our family retreat, which is in the middle of the woods, in the middle of nowhere, with like 6 of them always. And I have this vision of them on a bedside table, completely captivating, just the way you described. More recently, Howard Stern's book is, I know, Howard Stern's compendium of very interesting interviews that he ever did. May come as a surprise that I am a Howard Stern listener, but he does have some really interesting celebrity interviews. So that is a total uh, exercise in opposites, and would love to hear anybody else's.
I love that. Okay, well, if you think of your favorite summer read as we keep going, definitely drop that in the chat. I think those books that we remember from summers past are some of the most formative books, and I want to get your recommendations. Maybe I'll dive into that stack of yellow spined Nancy Drews this summer. I love that. Okay.
Find at the Mark Twain Library Book Fair, as you know.
Exactly. Exactly.
Abbe, what does make the best summer read? Like what, from a publishing perspective and from a...
That is such a great question, because it's, there's a little bit of je ne sais quoi that happens with a great summer read, but I think you want it to be easily readable, and it shouldn't feel like work. So whatever that means to you, I don't think it has to be light and fluffy necessarily, in that you don't feel like you're getting any nutritional content, kind of. It has to be compulsively readable, but I don't think that necessarily means, dumb, the way that it may have been, those connotations were in the past. And I know that a lot of authors are very sensitive about their books being called a beach read, because I think it does still carry those connotations, like you only read this once at the beach, it's kind of fluffy. So I know a lot of authors have some pause to hear their book described as a beach read. But for me, I think anything that you want to go back to again and again, and the summer days are longer, you have more time. You might be on vacation, God willing. So something that will keep your attention between like swimming and tennis and all of the other amazing things that summer has to offer. These books are gripping, and they're gonna keep you riveted and turning the pages. So with that, let's start with some fiction, because for me, I love to take a vacation in the form of a book, and fiction is so, it will transport you. So one of the books that I just finished that I absolutely loved is called This Time Tomorrow, and it's by Emma Straub. And I love, love, love Emma Straub. She is incredible. One of her other books is the I almost picked her other book called The Vacationers as my quintessential summer read, because it's set on a vacation, on a family vacation that of course goes awry, as they sometimes tend to do. But this is her latest book, and it just came out in May, and I finished it last Friday, and I was crying the whole time at the end, but in such a good way. So basically, we meet our main character, Alice, on sort of the eve of her 40th birthday, and she hasn't married. She still works at the private school that she attended as a student in Manhattan. Kind of her orbit is small, and her dad is sick and he's in the hospital, and she somehow miraculously drinks too much on the night of her 40th birthday and wakes up and it's her 16th birthday. And she gets to see her dad totally vital and loving life. And she gets to see her friends back in high school. She gets to, look at the Reality Bites poster on her wall and revisit the music that she loved and the old t-shirts. moreover, she gets to sort of make life choices differently and see how her life turns out as a result. So it's such a lovely father-daughter story, which, I am partial to, but it's really, it's an interesting thought experiment about what if you could take a vacation to your past and what would you do differently? So that is a really fun book. And then let's see, another piece of fiction that I am really looking forward to is The House Across the Lake. So Riley Sager, another thing that is so great about summer reading is a thriller. And thrillers are propulsive. They keep you turning the pages. That's, what they're designed to do. So I have read so many of Riley Sager's other books, and I'm very excited to read The House Across the Lake because it's set in the summer on a lake. This woman is a recently widowed actress. She goes, she's trying to get out of the eye of the paparazzi. So she goes to her family's lake house in Vermont, and what does she have to do? Not much. She drinks bourbon. She looks through her binoculars, and she kind of, spies on this glamorous couple across the lake. And, he's powerful. She's gorgeous. She becomes a little obsessed with these two. And then one day she saves the wife from drowning, and the two strike up a friendship. And, the more that Casey begins to know about Catherine, it's sort of clear that the marriage between these two, whom she thought was so glamorous, is not actually all that it appears to be. And, no spoilers, but Catherine, the wife, the model, the gorgeous wife, suddenly disappears, and Casey is hell-bent on figuring out what happened. She believes it's Tom, the husband. So she becomes a little bit obsessed. And it's so, the lake house setting is so great. I think the concept of your neighbors, what are they up to? These relationships that look so storybook from the outside, what's really going on there. So I'm very, very excited to read that one. And one of the books that I recently finished that I think is so great for summer is, most of you are close to New York City. I lived in New York for a long time, and I've recently moved back to Philadelphia. But the author Fiona Davis, I'm sure I've talked about her in this setting before. I'm just obsessed with her. Her genre, her sub genre is historical fiction, and she examines, she sets each of her books in a different building in New York City. And so I'm just going to drop her whole page here because I recommend every single one of these. I have read them all. I'm such a fangirl for her. But so the first one, The Dollhouse, is set at the Campbell Apartments, where, young women who were going to the Barbizon typing school would go and stay. And it was chaperoned, so it wasn't unseemly that you were a young woman staying on your own in New York City, but you were there to learn how to be a typist. And so the first book, The Dollhouse, is set at the Campbell Apartments. And she always does a very cool thing where she sort of has a one time period setting, and then she flash forwards to a different time period. And the building, of course, is like what it all orbits around. But I loved that one. The Address is set uptown, and that is at the Dakota, of course, famous. That's where John Lennon was shot, right outside the Dakota. This book has absolutely nothing to do with John Lennon, but we meet a servant in 1884, and then we flash forward to an interior designer who gets the chance of a lifetime in 1984. I absolutely loved that one. It dials into some great mental health threads, some addiction threads. What does it mean to be mad? So lots of secrets at the Dakota. All of these books kind of have a propulsive mystery to them, in addition to the history, in addition to the strong feminist characters that we meet. The Masterpiece is set, of course, at Grand Central Station. I loved that one. The Chelsea Girls is set at the Chelsea Hotel. There we meet two playwrights who are in the throes of McCarthyism in the 1950s. They're being accused of being communists. So lots of great theater threads. The Masterpiece, I forgot to mention, at Grand Central focuses on a little known but actual art school that was located in the top of Grand Central Station. And so she takes this real thing from real life and spins off this yarn. And again, we have a character who is attending art school then, and we meet another woman in the 1970s who is working to save Grand Central and give it landmark status. The Lions of Fifth Avenue, I perhaps talked about the last time I was here, but that is set at the New York Public Library, right on Fifth Avenue. So a good book for all library lovers to read. I just adored this one. We meet Laura Lyons, who in 1913, her husband becomes the superintendent of the library, and she launches a budding journalism career. And applies to Columbia Journalism School, and just the possibilities for a woman in 1913 are limited, and suddenly her world is sort of cracked open. And then in 1993 we meet her granddaughter Sadie, who is a curator of history at the New York Public Library. So those two are fabulous. And to finish our six fecta or whatever. The Magnolia Palace, I adored. I recently just finished this one. This is set sort of back in the art world, and the building is what we now know as the Frick, where the Frick collection is held. But of course, it used to just be a gorgeous Gilded Age mansion. And we meet Lillian, who is based off of a real woman who was the nude model for so many of the figures gracing landmarks across New York. So it was her body that, a sculptor used to do a sculpture at the Plaza Hotel and the Brooklyn Bridge. So she kind of has this iconic status at the time, 1919. Of course, it's the Spanish flu as well. And she has to find some refuge in the house of the Frick mansion. And we later meet a model in the mod 1960s who finds herself at a shoot at the Frick. So you can tell, I just love these books so much. I think they're so fun. So that's your historical fiction. And I'll pause there, and I'll come back to some more fiction later.
What if somebody is really bent on nonfiction? Can a nonfiction book be a summer read?
Yes, I'm so glad you asked me that, because oftentimes we think of nonfiction as so dry and it's like homework. But for me, I love a good memoir, which of course is nonfiction. And so one of my favorite like subgenres of memoirs are chef and foodie memoirs. So I love the work of Ruth Reichel. So she, of course, was the editor-in-chief at Gourmet magazine, and her memoir, Save Me the Plums, is all about her tenure at this iconic magazine. And she's funny, she's warm, she talks about, turning to food in her grief after learning her job was ending and the magazine was closing. But she also sort of looks at the way food winds its way through the biggest moments of her life. When she was a hippie in Berkeley growing up, when the whole idea of farm to table even, was coming out of existence, before diners were like, I don't really care where my food comes from. But she really chronicles a lot of not only the food trends over the past 50 years, but the chefs. And so I love a good memoir when it comes to nonfiction. And then I think, nonfiction is such a great way to learn something. And if you are chomping at the bit to learn something this summer, I think there's no better way than, turning to a book. And so one of the best things to do, I think, in our family, at least in the summer, is to go birding. And so, birding, I have to just say, has gotten so hot in the pandemic. Everyone turned to birding, and it's been very fun to see kind of like this trend that is not new at all, but kind of emerging when people slowed down and started looking around them. So one fun book to turn to if you're new at birding is of course, Sibley is the name associated with all birding. So Sibley's Birding Basics. This is really, especially if you're getting someone younger into birding or new into birding, this is really like how to identify a bird with their feathers, with the way their tails fan out when they fly, with their song, with their behavior. It's very much a good intro to birding. And so I think anytime you can take the summer to learn a little bit more about something that really interests you, I think that's a great way to use the extra time that you might have in the summer. And then another excellent thing to do over the summer is, we are about to celebrate Juneteenth, and that is on Sunday. And if you are really interested in learning more about Juneteenth, that is, of course, the day that the last enslaved Black people were emancipated in the US, which was in 1865. So I think there's no better time than the summer to really dive into something that you don't know much about. And so the book that I will really call out as, kind of one of the best books on the topic is Dr. Ibram Kendi and Keisha Blaine's book. They edited this compendium called 400 Souls. And this is, it gives me chills to talk about because it's so powerful. This is a community history of African Americans, of Black humans in the US, starting in 1619 when the first slave ship brought Africans to this soil. And they, Dr. Kendi and Keisha Blaine, reached out to a chorus of voices to each write a chapter in this compendium. And so it really weaves this tapestry of voices, starting from 1619, that's a year before the Mayflower, all the way through to present day. So it's absolutely beautiful, and it's I think because they are divided up into different voices, it's a really wonderful thing to tackle in the summer, because they feel like personal vignettes, they feel like short stories. You can kind of read a moment in time and then put it down, go to the beach, go talk to a friend, have lunch, and come back, and you don't feel like you're starting from the middle of a chapter. You meet a new voice, a new period in history. So I will recommend that one. But if you are interested in doing more reading about Juneteenth, we have a whole list of books that are really wonderful resources to talk about, really the history of Black Americans.
Abby, if I might jump in here, the Mark Twain Library is having a commemoration on Friday at 4:00 about Juneteenth. And so, start one of these books and come and share a story or a feeling that you had when you've read the book. We're going to be reading some poetry, sharing stories, and listening to some beautiful jazz music. So I hope everyone will join us for that. So thank you, Abby, for expanding our opportunity to look at Juneteenth.
Oh, that sounds fantastic. What a great celebration that will be.
It'll be lots of fun.
Yeah. So another sort of organizing principle that we often can see in the summer are books that are set at the beach, right? So they're not necessarily beach reads, but hello, they are set at the beach. So I always think like books that really give you a summer vibe, like they hit you over the head with it, are so fun. So this is a great list of books that are set at the beach that give you those beach vibes. And I will just call out my favorite here, which is Malibu Rising by Taylor Jenkins Reid. So I absolutely adore Taylor Jenkins Reid. She, of course, wrote another one of my favorite books, which is Daisy Jones and the Six, which is sort of told like a behind the music look at a band. So that is for all of you music lovers out there. But Malibu Rising is such a fun book because it takes place in Malibu. It looks at these 4 siblings, the Rivas, and they are the children of this famous actor. So everyone knows their dad, Mick Riva, and these are their 4 kids. So think about like who we know from the tabloids, like, Prince George or whatever. This is Prince George and his siblings who have grown up. They've been in the spotlight their whole lives. And this is what happens one summer. Nina is a famous surfer, and her image is on this poster, almost, like one of those famous sort of supermodel images that you were so acquainted to seeing in every teenage boy's bedroom in the 1970s. Like this has happened to her. And so there's a lot of questions about consent and what do we own about ourselves when we're in the public eye. So I really, really just loved this book. It's a very fun, fast read. And she's got a new one coming out at the end of the summer. The author does, which I'm very excited. But the other one of hers that I mentioned is Daisy Jones and the Six, which I'll drop here, which picture like, how much drama there was in Fleetwood Mac. There is even more drama in this fictional band. This is set in the 1970s. Everyone is good looking. Everyone is wearing minimal clothing, and they are singing in bars in LA until they hit it big, and now they're on tour across America. And so I just absolutely devoured this book. It's so fun. So yes, please, if you have any interest in music, that's a really fun one. And now I will give a little bit of a plug to science fiction, which I am not your sci-fi gal really, but I have found a few sci-fi books that I do love. And one of them is this book called Dark Matter by Blake Crouch. Now, I don't really understand the science behind this, but you don't have to enjoy it, because I love the way that Blake Crouch plays with the idea of this multiverse. And, you know, we meet this guy, Jason. He's just a normal guy, and all of a sudden he is attacked by this abductor. He's knocked unconscious, and he wakes up surrounded by strangers in hazmat suits. He begins to live in this world that he's woken up to. The woman that says is his wife, he's never seen before. The son that he left back in his old life has not been born in this life. He's not this ordinary physics professor that he was in the life that he left. He's now this big deal, celebrated genius who has achieved something remarkable. So which life is real? Where does he belong? Will he ever get back? This thriller, it is a thriller. It's, you know, you are turning the pages so fast. The science behind, like, what the heck happened and how is this possible? It did not bog me down in a way that was distracting, or that I felt like, what's happening? It's really another book. It's funny that I keep choosing these about, you know, the paths not taken and the choices that we make in our life. And so maybe that's something I should think about and talk to my therapist about. But, you know, it does feel like there's a very compelling, dramatic question there. It's like the things that we decide in our life, how much difference do they make? So I really loved this book.
Abby, what about romance? We always think of summer romances. Do you have any good summer romance?
Absolutely. So, of course, as we know, right now is Pride in the month of June. So I have to give a plug for a great queer romance. And this is actually by a great friend of mine, Camille Perry. This book is called When Katie Met Cassidy. And we meet these two gals. Katie is this, you know, horse farm, Kentucky transplant in New York. She's got these traditional values. She's just been dumped by her fiance. It feels like the beginning of Legally Blonde, except, you know, she's a lawyer and she finds herself across the table from this other hotshot, high-powered lawyer, Cassidy Price. You know, she's wearing this well-cut suit. She knows what she's doing. And these two women have this chance meeting at a bar. The chemistry is unbelievable. So I think that a queer romance is so fun because, you know, it's all about representation, right? If you have never seen your love story told in a book that everyone is talking about, then that feels really exciting and really special. So I highly recommend, if you've never read a queer romance, they're really wonderful. But I will also give a shout out to one of my other favorite romance writers, Jasmine Guillory. She is a Black woman and writes the best stories. I mean, she's another like Fiona Davis. I will read anything she writes. And she has a new book coming out in September, but this book that I love that is so perfect for the summer, because it has like those 4th of July vibes, is called Party of Two. And we meet this woman, Olivia Monroe. She is high powered. She moves to LA to start her own law firm. I swear, not all of the romances I read are about lawyers, but this one happens to be. And Olivia meets this gorgeous guy at a hotel bar, and they flirt the entire night. And then all of a sudden, she learns that he's this junior senator. And she's like, I absolutely have no interest in dating a politician. No, thank you. Goodbye. But he surprises her, and she's kind of, really shocked to learn that he's sweet, he's attentive, he's noble. He's not just this kind of privileged white guy politician that got everything handed to him. So they start seeing each other secretly because she does not want to be in the news, and neither does he. And of course, secret dating, that's its own trope. But when they do finally go public, they were right, because the media scrutiny is out of control. And, now people are digging up her past. They're calling her a bad girlfriend. So it's all about like, can we survive this scrutiny of the outside eye? So I really loved this one. It's, fun and got that political bent to it. So Jasmine is wonderful. And I will also just say, speaking of representation, another trend that I'm seeing in romance is representation in terms of neurodiversity. And so this author, Helen Wong, writes about, she has these romance books that center on autistic characters. And The Bride Test centers on this guy, Kai, who is autistic. He doesn't feel that he has any feelings. He is very much, keeps people at arm's length. He feels irritation when things don't go his way, but he really avoids relationships. And so his mom, of course, takes matters into her own hands, like moms sometimes do, and she goes to Vietnam to find him the perfect bride. And she meets this woman, Esme, who is just trying to survive in Ho Chi Minh City. She is living in the slums, and she sees an opportunity, smart girl, to move to America and meet this potential husband. And so she cannot turn this down. And then she meets this guy who is robotic. The seduction of this man does not go as planned for Esme. But of course, there is, more than one way to love, more than one way to care about someone and to show your emotions. So I really, really, really just loved this book. And it's really wonderful to see, neurodiverse characters falling in love and not being limited to a stereotype. So Helen Wong she's a wonderful writer. And if you like this one, she also has 2 others that are really, really great.
What a great variety of romance novels. Thank you. And summer means a lot of travel, and often travel in the car when we can't have a book in front of us. Do you have any audiobooks that you would recommend?
Oh, yes. So audiobooks, I have to admit, they are so addictive, but they're oftentimes, for me, I always forget about them. And then I remember, and I'm like, oh my God, I could have been reading this whole time I've been cleaning my apartment. So, you know, don't be like me. Just put on an audiobook as soon as you start doing any chore. I especially love them for gardening. They're really wonderful. So one of the audiobooks that I really, really recommend is Margaret Atwood's follow-up to, of course, The Handmaid's Tale, and that is The Testaments. So this audiobook won an award, and it takes place, the action of the novel takes place 15 years after The Handmaid's Tale ends. You know, Gilead has its grip on the power still, but there are signs that, you know, the powers that be are beginning to rot from within. So this book centers on the lives of three very, very different women, but you know, two have grown up in that old world order and have always known things as they've existed. And there's one young gal who is going to surprise us all. So I really, really, really loved this book, and it's fascinating, especially listening to it. It's very mesmerizing, you might say. Yeah, so definitely I loved that. What else will I say for audiobooks? Oh, Homegoing by Ya Jesse is such a beautiful story. It starts in Ghana in the 18th century. We meet two half-sisters that are born in different villages. They have the same father. They do not know about one another. One woman will go on to marry an Englishman and lead this palatial life in these castles. The other will be captured in her village on a raid and sold into slavery. And so it follows the parallel paths of these sisters, and then follows their descendants down through 8 generations. So this book is great for a very, very long ride, because these women, these family members will stick with you. And it's just so beautifully told. And it's read by this voice actor named Dominic Hoffman, who is, oh my God, his voice is incredible.
Sounds
So
amazing.
I recommend that one. Yeah.
Sounds great. You know, Abby, we can't forget Father's Day, right? And all those fathers out there. Is there something we can recommend for them?
Yes. Oh my gosh. Father's Day. Yeah, it's you know, instead of a tie, I always recommend a book. And speaking of Dr. Ibram Kendi, if you know a dad who has young kids, Dr. Kendi's just written this book for parents called How to Raise an Anti-Racist. So it's great for parents, of course, it's great for teachers or any caregiver really, but this is all about the stages of child development, kind of starting from pregnancy through toddlers and school-age children to teenagers, really at every stage of life, like how do you raise an anti-racist, and how do you talk about things that you feel might be difficult, but are really, really, really vital to, you know, creating incredible humans. So that is, that's a great like parenting book. But in terms of other great books, you know, if your father figure loves to cook, I absolutely recommend Rodney Scott's World of Barbecue. So Rodney Scott is a Black pitmaster, and this is his incredible book where he dives into the rubs that he uses and the stories behind, his own upbringing and how he came to love, barbecuing. So if your dad, loves to grill, that's a great one. And also, honestly, you will benefit because you will get to eat the food. So let's see. Finally, I think one of the authors that I just adore is Nick Offerman. So we know him from all sorts of shows, but Parks and Rec is the one that I know him most from. And he's so funny. I think he's like the next David Sedaris. He's got that dry sense of humor, but he's written this book of comedy that is called Where the Deer and the Antelope Play. And it's kind of his Bill Bryson-esque take on observations from a walk outside. So he goes on these walks and he starts observing things and then teases out, elucidations about American farmland and watersheds and the frontier and what that means and what does conservation mean and what do national parks even do if they're filled with millions of people dropping their trash everywhere. So he's so funny. If you have a person in your life who likes the outdoors, it's not just good for fathers, but that's a really it's a really, really funny book. So let's see, what am I missing here? I will just drop a surprising novel for your dad, because I feel like dads need to be surprised more. This is called Memorial, and it's by this author, Brian Washington, who is a queer man of color. And this book centers on a love story between these two men. So I always like to push the envelope, have them read about two men in a relationship. But it's such a great story. This relationship it's almost run its course. These guys have been living together for a while. They do love each other, of course, but are they still in love? So they live in Houston, and just as Mike, his mom is about to arrive from Japan, but all of a sudden his dad, who still lives in Japan, and his parents are no longer together, his dad is ill. And so Mike leaves to go take care of his dad in Japan while his mom arrives, and he leaves his mom with Benson, his boyfriend. And Benson is a Black daycare worker. And this book is all about like found family, because Benson and Mike's mom, they say very little, but they connect over food. And she cooks Japanese food for him, and he learns to help. And Mike is, his estranged father is dying in Osaka, and those two form this bond that they have never had before. So it's just a really lovely, lovely lovely story about what it means to be home and family. So I think, give it to your dad. It'll surprise him, and I think he would like that.
Sounds like a good surprise. Well, Abby, you have done it again. I think I need to read every book on your list. I hope everybody else has a long list, but should we open it up and see if there are questions out there, specific books that
I would
like to ask about? Great. So please, if you can chat, unmute yourself and ask a question of Abby, or you can type it into the chat. We'd love to hear what you're thinking about and what books you're curious about.
Ab, I know your mom's not here because she's doing some grassroots work somewhere, which makes me think of maybe books that have a political bent. Anything in that vein for this summer that you'd recommend?
That is such a great question. Yes, I think so. In terms of, getting your hands dirty, getting your connecting to your community. I think one of the best books you can read is called The Purpose of Power, and it's by Alicia Garza. And she is actually one of the founders of the Black Lives Matter movement. And she really talks about the power of community in transforming the worlds that we live in. So, we cannot do anything without one another is really her point. And so in order to enact change, you have to first bring people together. And so that started with her, with this hashtag Black Lives Matter, which became a movement on social media. But she has always been a community organizer her whole life. And so she really offers some lessons around how to build community. And when you build community, there are people from all over who come with all sorts of different backgrounds and opinions and thoughts and ideas. And, how do you make room for everyone while still getting stuff done? So The Purpose of Power is a really, really important book. And the other one I will say is The Sum of Us by Heather McGhee. This is another really important book in that it, I think every white person should read it, because this actually gets really into data. She is an economist, and she looks at how racism is not just costly for people of color, which of course we know that it is, but rather it has a cost for everyone. And living in a racist society as we do, and the racism that exists in politics and policymaking and policing, that does not just negatively affect people of color. It really is a toxic mix that brings everybody down and is a tax essentially on all of us. So that's reflected in rising student debt, the housing crisis, collapsing public infrastructure. And it's very fascinating and kind of approaches racism in our country from a financial lens, which I think is really a unique way of doing it. And if what you care about is the dollars and cents in your own pocket, then she makes a very compelling case. So The Sum of Us is a very powerful book. Amy, I have not read Geraldine Brooks's new book, but you are absolutely up on the scene, because Geraldine has a brand new book called Horse, which is coming out today, actually. So I will drop.
Oh,
that.
I thought it was last week. Oh, but okay. Thank you.
Oh, no problem. June 14th. Is that
okay?
Today? I have no idea.
Yeah. Great.
So I'm dying to read this book. Have you read it?
I have not, but I've read a lot of all her other books, I think, and I'm a big fan. So I'm looking forward to it. And I just wondered if you had the inside scoop.
I have not, but this looks incredible. And just like a few of the other books that I was talking about, it skips through time. So this one is Kentucky in 1850. We have New York City in 1954. And we have Washington, D.C. in 2019. And Geraldine Brooks, if you don't know her, she is an absolute wizard when it comes to kind of stitching all of these things together. So I highly, highly recommend that. So yes, Amy, you have to go read that and report back.
Thank you.
Okay, Catherine, recommendations for a history book. Now, what flavor of history are you looking for?
Maybe history with, I run a history book club, and I feel like we need to read more books about women in history. So maybe one with a woman or non-European history.
Oh, cool. I would love to join your book club. That sounds so awesome. Okay, well, one book that is not about a notable woman in history, but that's kind of the point, because there aren't that many, because history has been written by men. So this book is very unbelievably beautiful. It just won a National Book Award. It's called All That She Carried, and it centers on a family. So this is not a notable woman, but this is the story of a sack, like a bag, that this woman, this enslaved woman named Rose, carried. And she packed this cotton bag when her daughter was threatening to be sold, and escaped. And she then, this bag got passed down through generations. The family history was embroidered upon it. And so this woman, Tia Miles, finds this bag, and she goes back and traces these women who were not written into history, and yet they created their own account through needle and thread, through cotton, through this bag. They created their own archival record. And so Tia Miles goes back and finds what she can about these women and tells the story of how they are connected through the threads, literally and figuratively, these threads through history. And it's just unbelievable. So I highly, highly recommend that. But let's see, if you're looking for some other cool women, what is the name of that book? It's right on the tip of my tongue. Oh, here it is. This is, I love kind of untold, this is not European, which I know you said you didn't want, but this is about this young woman who led this huge spy network against Hitler, and nobody knew then who she was. She's this 31-year-old French woman. She's a young mother, and she is like the chef de resistance against Hitler during the war. And so this is very cool. She the secret agent name that she chooses for herself is Hedgehog, because she's a tough little animal, and she's unthreatening in appearance, and yet she can ball herself up and be a tough little hedgehog. So I just love that as like the metaphor for this woman. It just shows how people did not take her seriously, and she was able to use that to her advantage. So those are two great history books. And
I didn't catch the title of that one.
That one is called, oh yes, I didn't say it. It's Madame Fourcade's Secret War by Lynn Olson.
Thank you.
I bet it's.
Thank you. Both of those sound fantastic. And even though I said not European, I'm a sucker for the Nazi stuff. So
I know. That's awesome. What else have you read in book club?
Right now we're reading a book about Madame Cixi. She was a Chinese empress, basically, but she got to be an empress because her young son was supposed to be the emperor. Anyways, something I knew nothing about. Fascinating, so interesting, really wonderful book Madam
Wow.
Cece.
Love that. Okay, Catherine needs her own hour at Mark Twain Library Zoom, and we'll all come to hear what else.
Well, it's a history book through the Mark Twain Library, so anyone can join anytime.
Oh, good. Okay, awesome.
Other questions out there?
I will end with my final plug, which is sometimes in the summer, truly all you have time for is short stories, because you're picking people up from swim practice and you're going this way and that way. And, you know, the summer demands a lot of us. So sometimes short stories are the best. And my favorite collection is You Think It, I'll Say It by Curtis Sittenfeld. She is just a magnificent writer. She's from the Midwest and she's so hysterically funny. And these are very wry observations. They're all set in modern day. These are stories that I read maybe 5 or 6 years ago, and I cannot stop thinking about them. So I can't even do any of them justice, but I just love this collection. So if you're looking for something to kind of just stick in your beach bag all summer long, a book of short stories is great.